Hi, my name is Rob Forster. I'm from LogMeIn. I work in the marketing department down in London. We're up here today in Manchester with Jessica Barker for the Conversation from the Vault series event. We've been focusing really on the culture around security and the challenges, the solutions, the practical tips as well for our audience. And we're keen to get more. So we're back in with Jessica now. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
So Jessica, we've heard a lot about the challenges that we face in implementing kind of a positive organisational culture towards security. We've heard a lot from you today around how culture is managed but also measured, and what we're really keen to know more is kind of what challenges do you see in industry and what kind of tips would you have for that?
Yeah, it's a really good question because companies face a lot of challenges around security culture. One of the most common that I see is a culture where people want to avoid speaking up, if they maybe have had an incident. So if they've clicked on a link that they're worried about, downloaded something that looks a little bit funny, if they've had a phone call and given away a bit of information and they realize they're not sure who they were speaking to, or maybe they've lost some paperwork. People sometimes can worry, if I speak up about this, am I going to be punished? Am I going to be blamed? So in security, I think we really need to move that culture away from blaming people, away from telling people that they're the weakest link and they're the problem, because we know that if people don't speak up when they've maybe had an incident, then that is one of the biggest challenges we're going to face, because if we don't know that there's been an incident, we can't do anything to manage it. So we really need to create this culture that is more positive, that is more open, and where people feel that actually they can talk to security without always getting in trouble.
And what do you think it is specifically about the human mind that stops them coming forward if something does go wrong?
I don't know if it's so much the human mind or if it is more of a cultural thing. Okay. And I think, partly, no one wants to be responsible for something going wrong or for having done something that they shouldn't. But particularly if you work in an environment where, people are blamed, where people are punished, where people are made to feel really stupid when they actually do something that we can all be susceptible to. We can all be susceptible to social engineering. And if you work in that environment that really blames people, then of course you naturally, you're going to keep quiet about it. You're going to try and hide it as much as you can. And that we know is the worst thing you can do for security.
Absolutely. So one of the key questions we get asked, Jessica, as part of our customer base is around, once we identify that the culture needs changing, how can we go about implementing that change? So what sort of solutions and tips do you have for companies who are going through this transformative phase right now?
Sure, there's lots of things you can do. One of the things, it's partly, thinking about the behaviours that you want to encourage and how you're going to do that. Obviously, having leadership on board and showing those behaviours is really powerful because of social proof. People look to how others behave to decide how they're going to behave. And we particularly look to those in authority, and we also look to those that we relate to and that we admire. So I also think that security champions are really effective in shifting culture. Security champions is the idea of having someone or different people embedded in departments. They're not doing security as their day job, they don't have as a security background, but they act kind of like you would have health and safety reps or fire wardens, and they champion security in that part of the business. Thereby, if an incident happens, if people are worried about something, they don't have to worry about going to security, which can be intimidating. They can turn to a colleague that they know, and they can get that advice, and they can report incidents, for example, that way.
So these people aren't necessarily technical. They could be someone from the, from the marketing team or the HR team, or someone who isn't necessarily dived into the tech of the company.
Exactly.
Right.
So you'd want people in those different departments acting as champions, and you've hit on another real benefit, which is they won't have technical backgrounds. They won't speak the jargon that we speak. So actually, when they're getting the materials, when they're getting the content, when they're getting the training to represent security, they will push back against you and they'll say, why am I telling people to use two-factor authentication? Why am I telling people to use a password manager when we're not defining what that is? I don't know what that term is, my team won't either. Mm-hmm. So they help you come closer to the business by showing you some of the language you should be using, some of the issues you should be addressing.
Perfect. Yeah, and so often with our customers we hear all about the issues with the staff adopting, which is fair enough, and we understand like the reasons you've explained there, why that might be. But we also hear a lot about they're struggling. Maybe an IT security person is using LastPass or another password manager personally.
Yes.
They want to roll it out to the wider team, but they can't get the budget approval, or maybe they can't get the recognition higher up.
Yeah.
I mean, you spoke earlier around speaking the right language. But is there anything else you can kind of give advice on around that piece?
It's really, I think, showing benefit to the business. When we're in security, we might talk about the benefits of a password manager in terms of very much focusing on technical benefits, when instead we can be talking to the business and talking to seniors in a language that they relate to. Talking much more in business terms, talking about business objectives, talking about money, and really highlighting the business benefits of those, the time saved, the fact you're not going to get password resets, which takes X amount of time of the security team, increasing productivity.
Absolutely.
All of those benefits that come from a password manager that the business actually might care about more than some of the technical benefits.
So Jessica, we hear all in the news at the moment, breaches everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you always hear about them. One thing we keep hearing is that they're increasing as well. But throughout this talk today and our conversation so far, you've been very optimistic. Why is that?
Yeah, I spoke about being optimistic about security, and I think we do see breaches all the time, and as part of our job, we have to read about them, we have to know about them. Sometimes we're involved in them. So there are lots of challenges in security, and we're going to continue facing those challenges. But I'm optimistic for a few reasons. One is we can look at the history of security. We're a young industry, we're pretty new, and we've actually achieved a lot over the last few decades. So if we take stock of how far we've come, and actually the solutions we have in place, like password managers that are really beneficial, we can see that we're making progress. Yeah, we've still got a bit of a hill to climb, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't recognize how far we've come and what we will achieve. And I also am optimistic because I look at other big challenges we faced as society, global violence and wars, epidemics, poverty even, things that have caused massive problems for humankind over centuries. And it's taken us a long time, and I'm not saying we've fixed those problems, but when you look at the statistics, you can see that we have advanced in all of those areas beyond belief. And so, yes, security is a big problem, but humankind is capable of amazing things. And that includes security. It's going to take us a while, but we will continue to improve.
Definitely. And finally, we had a question earlier around the demographic of security. So, are the young people more at risk? Are the more senior? Probably the best way to describe it. Are they more at risk? And also, across the country, across the world, almost. What's your view? Do you feel like younger people are more aware? We heard about biometrics and the role that biometrics play in school dinners now, and how that's bringing the age into security even younger. Yeah. How do you see the demographic twist?
It's a really interesting question, thinking about demographics and security, and which age group kind of cares more or is more at risk. A lot of people, I think, look at the younger generation and worry that the younger generation don't take security and don't take privacy seriously. And one thing I found, for example, around biometrics is that actually it's the younger generation that are most worried about biometrics. And I think this may be partly because their schools collect biometric data. So from a young age, they're actually questioning what's happening with that. So I think there's different trends in different age groups, but one group that I do see being vulnerable is the older generation, partly because I think we don't target security messages at them as much, partly because technology has advanced so much in their lifetime that they're maybe not as aware of the risks, more trusting as a generation. So I think we can't assume that younger people are more risky and that older people are more secure, because actually a lot of the statistics don't really show that.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, and from tonight we've heard all about the messaging, and we from LastPass we are always given percentages of people who've got the same password, and do a password test and test how strong your password is. But actually that fear factor hasn't really seemed to resonate as much, and we've heard a lot about from you tonight around the culture and why that might be.
Yes.
Fascinating. Changing the game for LastPass as well. I think we're going to take away a lot of tips and messages, and I hope other people do as well.
Sure.
Around tackling it from a different angle.
That's great.
Engage the human.
Yeah.
Really, rather than trying to scare them away.
Cool.
So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.